Today is March the 19th, 2025, and I am here with Patrick Heneghan, who is the Director of Restorative Justice for the Cheshire County uh, Correctional System,
Director of Restorative Justice, Tom, for Cheshire County, and
Cheshire County.
part of the work I'm doing is within the county jail and the county legal criminal justice system. Yep.
Super. And Patrick was referred to me via a very wonderful mutual friend, Dr. Ann Graber, who uh, has inspired many of us in our work with logotherapy. So today's theme is logotherapy and restorative justice. So I don't want to say too much. I want to give you the chance to tell us all about yourself. So would you begin by saying a little bit about who you are and how you got to be where you are?
Great. Thank you, Tom, and thank you for the invitation. Delighted to be here. Belated Happy St. Patrick's Day to you. I have to put that out there right now.
Sure, thank
Um,
you.
Originally, I'm from St. John's, Newfoundland, in Canada. My wife and I moved down to Keene in New Hampshire 25 years ago. My background, I've been in the field of adult learning, adult education for the past 40 plus years. And just a little bit, but my degrees are my undergraduate degrees are in English literature and education. I have a graduate diploma in adult education. But I've been working with adults, I would say, Tom, my entire working career. And I got into this restorative justice work about 5 years ago. At the time, I think I told you this before. I was between jobs. We don't retire in our family. We become fun employed. And I've been working in Massachusetts for a number of years, and the company that I'd worked with was bought out. And at that time, I thought, okay, it's time to become fun employed for a while. And I did. And I came across a small group of volunteers who were doing some restorative justice work here in Cheshire County. And I got interested in this line of work uh, because it represented a different philosophy and a different way of dealing with individuals who committed crimes. And I have to tell you, it's been transformative is a big word, but it really has had a positive impact on my life in a way that I'll tell you about it. I'll tell you about it. Um,
Absolutely.
uh, in my career as an adult educator, I've always worked with folks, with adults who were experiencing difficult life situations, coming back to work, folks who were underemployed or unemployed, trying to get back into the community. I worked with folks who were coming in and out of jails and trying to get them back on track again. And in this position, I I heard an article. I was listening to the radio one afternoon. I heard a story about ending mass incarceration in the United States, and I was curious about that. And it was it was interesting from the point of view that I wondered if there was another way of relating with folks who were in jail and coming back into the community. And then I heard an interview on the radio about this restorative justice, and that really piqued my interest because restorative justice is all about healing and healing the relationships that have been harmed by a crime or criminal behavior. And in our legal system, when something happens, we go at it from the point of view of what happened, who's responsible, what laws were broken, uh, what's the penalty for breaking those laws. And it's very rational, it's very rules oriented, it's been around for a long time. Um, the lawyers will argue the law. A prosecutor in a criminal case will have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt every element of the law as it's written. Very rational, very regulatory. The other side, the defense attorney, his or her job is to create reasonable doubt. And once reasonable doubt is created, then we have what's known as, we have to render a verdict, guilty or not guilty. And in that process, which has been around for a long time, The law gets upheld very well, but the human element in that exchange is oftentimes overlooked. For instance, in the criminal justice system, if I'm the person responsible for the behavior, my defense attorney can tell me legally, and it's accepted under the law, Patrick, you don't have to say anything. In fact, anything you say may be held against you. So be quiet, sit down, I will argue, and we can get through it that way. So the person responsible for the crime can go through that whole process without uttering a word. The system will also look at the legal system. Let's prove intent. Let's prove the intent, and we'll go through due process and we'll see what happens. And it's very structured, very formal, very well regulated, and it is what it is. I don't like saying that, but that's the way it works.
Right, I understand. Yeah.
Now, the restorative philosophy in the justice world looks at the incident and asks similar questions, but with a very different focus.
Hmm.
What happened? Who was harmed? What are their needs? Who's responsible? And whoever is responsible, are they willing and able to repair the harm and meet the needs of the person? Very different shift in focus, Tom. In
Yes.
the restorative model, you begin with not the state, not the law. You begin with the needs of the person who was harmed. So it becomes a relational system of
Hmm.
justice, if you like.
Yes.
And so that whole approach really appealed to me from the point of view of repairing the relationship between the individuals and the community. And so I volunteered with a small group. We had a couple of small minor cases involving juveniles. And then the county advertised a position for a director, and I thought, why not? Let's go for it. And I put in for it, and I've been in it now for the last 5 years, and I'm really enjoying it. In fact, I'm loving it, and I'll
Yes.
get into that in a minute. But
Well, let me interrupt you now and just say that that's one thing that really came across to me when we spoke the first time, and also something that Dr. Graber, communicated to me about you, is that there is this sense of joy in your work. And I know people that are chaplains or guards in local prisons and so forth. They don't have your experience. They typically see a very dark and scary place that they oftentimes go into, and so to me that tells me a lot about the difference between the system as it is and I love this choice of wording here, relational system of justice, which to me, as a minister, seems so much more, in terms of repentance and restitution and restoration, any kind of theological terms that start with an R, I suppose. But there's a joy that you carry from this work. So I know you're going to tell us about some great success stories a little bit later on. Um,
yeah, and it's Tom, working with the guards, the COs, and the folks in the prison. I remember when I went out the first time to offer these restorative learning dialogues, and walking into the jail and learning the culture. And you mentioned dark places, but the culture is shaped by the system. The system is shaped by the legal system, which is very rational. So we don't see people at times. The system sees, okay, we see criminals and we see crime. We don't see the people. And I'll give you a quick example. I remember
mhm.
going in one afternoon and introducing myself to some of the folks who were incarcerated. Hey, I'm Patrick Heneghan. Nice to meet you. What's your name? And they would give me their names, the first name and their last name. And then we're just building that little rapport and relationship. And then I went back the second day to say, hey, I'd like to meet these folks. Well, who are you looking for? And I said, I'm looking for so and so, so and so. No, no, you don't call them by their first name. In our jail, it's last name only. And
Wow.
I said, what do you mean? He said, no, no. And I said, wow. the last time I addressed people by their last name only, I think I was in grade 1 or 2, when you'd yell across the playground, "Hey, Heneghan, get over here. You're on my team." And I said, "Wow, okay. Tell me why last name only." "Well, that's the professional barrier between being a guard and being an inmate. And we have to maintain that boundary, and we have to maintain that separation." And I made it, I just in my mind, I said, "Well, that may well be, but I'm going to call Tom Tom and Patrick Patrick." Because that's the relational aspect of it. And we
Yes.
can't be afraid of it. But sometimes I think the legal system really is afraid of that human, that human connection. Um, so that was a fascinating thing. And these, by the
Mm.
way, I'm not casting aspersions on the COs or the superintendent. They're doing their job. They're doing it well. Um, and they're in the culture is in a very small way dehumanizing them. Because remember, we're working in Cheshire County in Keene, New Hampshire, and the county's not a big county, but it's made up of 26 small towns.
I
Some
see.
of these COs, they go home, they're neighbors with the people that they're overseeing in the jail. And when that person comes out, they're going to be neighbors again. And I'm
Mm.
always curious, are you going to call your neighbor by the last name when you see them at the street or in the store? Of course not. And so we can't let the system dictate and diminish how human we're going to be in our interactions with people. And that's part of the joy I get with it, Tom. And
Yes.
we'll share some more of that. But we're all connected here. And I'm not a big guy for labels. Coming out of our circle today, just say thanks for coming. Nice to see you. See you next Wednesday. The other connection in the relational aspect of being restorative is human contact.
Yes.
The other thing I learned is that you can't shake hands. No
Yeah.
contact.
Wow. Mhm.
You can't shake hands. Well, yes, you can. It's just how you shake hands and when you shake hands, but that human contact. And our system today, is becoming more and more streamlined and automated and technologically advanced to the point that folks who are in our local jail, they can't have face-to-face visits with their family. It's all done over computer. And
Mhm.
hopefully the internet system is working at the time, and it's very costly.
Yes. Yeah. I've done that.
But
I've gone to a jail to visit someone, and it was like a little screen, and I had to schedule an appointment, and then he had to schedule an appointment, and I guess it is what it is, but it's certainly there's too many barriers of separation there. That's very profound in my opinion, and so now to draw a little logotherapy into it just for a second, there's a sense in which calling the person by their name is creating a noetic uh, connection with someone, a deep connection, you know.
it absolutely is. And it's tapping into a very, I don't know how profound, Tom, but Frankl always refers to the indomitable human spirit.
Mhm.
And every human being knows one thing in life, and that whether they are dead, they are autistic, nonverbal, severely disabled, can't move a limb. Every human being knows their name.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
every human being responds to their name when they hear it in different ways. And it's just one way of tapping into that human spirit. And, today, coming out of our restorative learning dialogue this afternoon, we always acknowledge their names. And I could go on a bit about, but the name is so important. It's so,
What's in a name?
yeah, everything.
Yeah, right. Very nice. That's very touching. I think that's worth the price of admission right there for me.
Well, it is. You know, there's too many little stories about that, but yeah, we leave it there.
But all right. I know that it's probably one of those I don't know, Zig Ziglar or somebody. I don't read those books, but somebody is always quoting something like the everybody's favorite sound is their own name or something along that line, and I'm sure that salesmen exploit that. You know, I always get a little weary of somebody who I don't know and they can't pick up on my name and start using it over and over again. You know, it's kind of like going to the restaurant and they keep calling me love or honey, and I'm like, no, my wife can call me that, but I don't want you calling me that. Uh,
That's
it,
right. And you know,
but it's not
the,
sincere. It's not like where I'm looking at you and say, Patrick, I'm happy to see you today.
right, right. And likewise, Tom.
Yes.
And the name, you know, using one's name builds connections. It plants the seed for relationship. The restorative values of restorative values of respect, relationship, responsibility, repair, and reintegration. How can you even begin to live those values and demonstrate those values and help others without knowing them by name? Once we know the name and we engage in that conversation and that dialogue, then we get to hear the story.
Hmm.
And the stories add to that connection. And I can talk to you a little bit about that when we talk about the restorative learning dialogues.
Yes. You make me think of two things. I'll just mention them in passing and move on. But in the logotherapy treatment plan that I think Joseph Fabry and Elizabeth Lucas uh, formulated, step one is separate the person from the problem, which essentially is what you do when you speak, say a person's first name, you say, Hi, Patrick, I am glad to meet you, and I'm here to learn more about you. And then, of course, I also have a little connection with narrative therapy, you know, where if you can separate the person, I think what we say in one context is the person is not the problem is the problem. There's a real sense in which all three of these approaches, restorative justice, narrative, and logotherapy, is recognizing the humanity of the individual. Whereas I think you said it sounds like the system, and I guess you've already said it, dehumanizes people in many ways. Uh,
It absolutely does, because in order for the system to work, you know, in the criminal system, you have a prosecutor, you have a defense attorney, you have the judges, you have all the police, legal professionals. They're only interested, and their focus is on the law.
mhm.
So even the language in a courtroom, the defendant, the alleged victim, the criminal act, and the use of names and personal names and pronouns is rare in a courtroom. And because once you get into the human element, ooh, that's going to become a little more complex. But the legalistic, rational element of rules are broken and here's the punishment, that is so mechanical and it's so institutionalized. You know, Frankl would call it is dehumanizing. Now we have to have laws and regulations in our communities, but it's how we apply them and how we use them that makes the difference. And then once, you know, the criminal justice system, and I don't want to focus too much on that, Tom, but
Sure.
once you get to that point of sentencing where we lock people up and put them away, well, the reason we do that is for punishment, deterrence, and to keep the community safe. Okay, so we lock them away and they're out of sight, out of mind for a period of time. But guess what? They're coming back. People are going to get out and they're going to return to our community. And there's a lot of unmet needs that are coming back with them. And yeah, our jails, they punish very, very well. No doubt about that. As for deterring others from similar behavior, well, we could argue that because recidivism rates are still high and people are coming
Mhm.
back, crimes are being committed. And as for keeping the community safe, well, people can be coming back from jail, not all of them, people coming out, but our community is afraid. What are we going to do now? Let's put them
Right.
on a registry. Let's put them here.
Yeah.
We don't want a halfway house here, not in my neighborhood. So think about it. In the restorative model, who has been harmed? What are their needs? Who's responsible? And how can we help meet those needs? That that approach alone engages and invites others to be part of it, not just the person responsible for the harm, but the person who was harmed. And when
Mhm.
it's done really, really thoroughly and well, what happens in that process is the relationship is shifting, and you get to know one another as people, as human
Mhm.
beings. Once you know another person as a human being and similar to you, guess what? We have a safer community.
Right.
And because of that relational bond, the chances for committing the same type of behavior against the community and that person is
Mhm.
reduced. So again, there's so much we could talk
Yeah.
about on that, but
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna sidestep a question that came to my mind. I'll mention it, and you can answer it if you want to, but you can also ignore it. But it made me think about how um, we think about rehabilitation in very cold, logical ways that absolutely dehumanize people. Now, let's take devil's advocate here for a minute. Somebody will say, "Well, that's all well and good, but
yeah.
someone can work the system and act repentant and so forth and come out and then." So I'm going to say there's got to be a case to be made that the success rate is higher than the failure rate with restorative justice. I think I may have botched that statement a little bit, but
No, it all depends how you define the success rate. Let me give you when we talk restorative justice, I've over the last number of years, I think we've had about 16 cases referred from the legal system. Now, of the 16 cases, which is great, um, the initial step is you reach out, or I reach out to the person who was harmed, the victim, if you like, okay? And I explain the process to the victim about restorative justice. Um, Here's how it's going to work. It's driven by your needs, and we're going to meet and prepare and get a sense of what you need, what needs to be repaired, how it can be done. We're not going to do more harm. Um, it's an opportunity for you to meet with the person who is responsible for the harm. So typically, I'll meet with the person. Why would you like to do this? And what are you expecting? And what are your needs? So it begins right away with the person who was harmed, and it's voluntary. So he or she needs to know this is not mandated by the courts. It's confidential, which means that the attorney, because the case is in the legal system, both attorneys have agreed to uh, sign off on confidentiality so that anything that's shared in the restorative process can't be used against them. It's going to be as safe as possible, physically safe, emotionally safe, spiritually safe. We're going to take all the precautions to keep it safe for you and for the other party. And if at any time you feel that your needs are not being met, you can stop the process and it'll get referred back. Okay.
mhm.
And then you meet, or we'll meet with the person who's responsible and ask the same questions. Why do you want to do this? Okay. And one of if it's voluntary and safe and confidential. And one of the things for the person who committed the harm is, are you willing and able to acknowledge responsibility for the harm? Are you willing and able to acknowledge impact of what you've done to another human being?
Mhm.
Are you willing and able to demonstrate genuine remorse, very genuine, deep remorse? Fourth step, are you willing and able to do what's necessary to repair the harm? And the fifth one is, are you willing and able to uh, make a commitment to no longer commit similar harm? So it's upfront. 50% of people, Tom, when it's explained to them, 50% of people who've been harmed, in my experience, have said no. Patrick, I don't want to do that. I want this to stay in the legal system. I want that person to be punished. I want that. And that's perfectly all right.
Mhm.
That's our,
Okay.
and you have the right to make that decision. They also say, uh, this is difficult. And so for the person, because it is difficult, you're going to sit and we're going to sit and we're going to share stories of the impact.
Sure.
Also, for the person responsible for the harm, this is really difficult. You mean I need to acknowledge responsibility from, yeah, yes, you do. Well, any good defense lawyer is going to say, hey, don't you say a word, anything you
Right.
can say, right?
Yeah.
And so some people will say, well, this restorative justice, to your earlier point, this is really easy. You're going soft on people. It's just the opposite. This is really difficult. It's challenging. It's I don't like to use the word transformative, but it is. It's potentially transformative for the individuals going through it because there's a great deal of self-reflection, self-responsibility, huge degree of accountability. I mean, the restorative process is always accountability focused on every step of the way. Accountability from the person who committed the harm and making sure the needs of the person who was harmed are respected and met in a safe and timely manner. But the voice of validation goes to the to the person who was harmed. So you're talking all this relational form of healing and justice, and that's complex
Hmm.
and it's messy at times, and it's extremely liberating for both parties when they are engaged in the process. So people have said to me, Patrick, 50%, that's not very good. It's not much of a success rate. To me, it's 100% success rate
Hmm.
because even 50% who said no, now that I understand what's involved, they've made an informed decision not to participate. And that is their right
Hmm.
because we have a system in place that will take care of all of that, right?
Right. Yeah. That was wonderful. I really appreciated that explanation. And so I guess then let me ask you this question. Have you then already described what a restorative learning dialogue is, or is this a nice segue into that now?
Beautiful segue, Tom. Thank you.
Thanks.
um, the restorative learning dialogues, which is we've started offering them at our local jail just over 2 summers ago. And the reason that we did this was because we weren't getting a lot of referrals for restorative justice from the legal system. We were
Hmm.
getting some, as I said. I mean, 16 over 4 years is pretty good because we had a wide range of cases. Um, so I approached the superintendent at the local jail and said, okay, we'd like to do some restorative learning dialogues. We're going to put them together, myself and my colleague, one of the volunteers in the community, Leaf Seligman is her name. So we got together and I said, Leaf, let's uh, let's offer something to the men and women who are incarcerated at our jail. 80% of them are pre-trial, so they're still innocent, but they're being held in the jail for a variety of reasons. And we looked at a wonderful book called, I think I mentioned it to you, Until We Reckon by Daniel Sered. Great, great book about a restorative approach to dealing with crime. And her book, chapter 5 in her book, is on accountability. And it's one of the best chapters on becoming accountable. Uh, it's my guidepost for the accountability piece for this.
Okay.
And so we said, okay, let's put some classes together, and we won't do it like a class, like a school. We're going to do it. We're going to call them restorative learning dialogues, and we're going to use the restorative practice of sitting in circle, and we're going to bring these ideas in and introduce the ideas to a group of our fellow neighbors who are incarcerated, and we will make this process voluntary. So it's not mandated by the superintendent or by the COs on the pod or the courts. It's going to be voluntary. And it's going to be based on shared stories. We're going to share our experiences with these themes and these topics around accountability. And and we're going to keep a restorative lens on, let's look at a couple of things. Becoming accountable, which is, I took you through those: acknowledging responsibility, impact, expressing remorse, doing sorry, and making a commitment to no longer committing similar harm. right from Daniel Surratt. Beautiful, beautiful. So they were the themes around accountability. And we added another 4 segments, which was restoring the relationship with self, with self. And that's the foundation. So when we talk about, restoring the relationship with self, because think about it, rehabilitation, repair, restoration, reconciliation, it begins with ourselves. How's my relationship with myself? And once that can be nurtured to a level of healthy self-respect, then I have something to heal my relationship with others and my relationship with community. And we did this, and so we put together these themes, and this is where Viktor Frankl's work came into my approach. So we looked at developing a healthy self-concept, acknowledging the harmed self, because Tom, as you know, if you in your work in jails and in prisons, 99% of the folks who are in our jails have been harmed themselves in their own life growing up, whether it's trauma at home, trauma in the community, all as I used to say, it's poverty, poverty of opportunity, poverty of education, poverty of dreams, poverty of ambitions, poverty of whatever. But that's been when you hear the stories, you get to see that. So let's start with oneself, and then healing the self, healing the harmed self, communicating feelings and needs, rediscovering. Here's rediscovering a sense of meaning and purpose, right? And
Right.
I think I sent you the flyer of the themes that we cover and the resources that we use, so you know what we're talking about.
Yes.
And as an adult educator, we're not going to teach this to people. We're not going to tell people how to do these wonderful philosophical, spiritual, attitudinal things. We are going to sit in circle with our neighbors who are in jail, and we are going to learn together. And so when we would do a circle around one of those themes, for instance, a theme around a healthy self-concept, the prompting question might be, tell us about what you love most about yourself. What do you like about yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean this in a narcissistic way, Tom. It's just what do you enjoy about yourself?
Right.
And we'd go around with a group of 6 or 7 of the folks who are incarcerated, and 2 of us as co-learners and co-facilitators, and we tell our stories. Tell us about a time when here's one that we had over Christmas, just before Christmas. What was the best present you ever received in your life? And what was the best present you ever gave?
Mm.
And as you have these simple prompts and people begin to open up and share their stories, now you get a sense of who they are, of where they come from. And all of the and these are very simple prompts, but all of the questions, when you sit in circle, we use a talking piece, which, the circle is an indigenous practice. Restorative justice goes way back. This is not Patrick Heneghan. The restorative approach to healing, it comes from our indigenous forefathers in North America, New Zealand, around the world.
Mm-hmm.
But we use a talking piece. The person who holds that talking piece is invited to speak or to listen or to pass. Everyone else in the circle listens. And each time the talking piece goes round, you get to hear and you get to listen, and you start making connections with one another. So we build it up that way, from healing the relationship with the self and others and the community. And now we'll move into becoming accountable. What does that mean? And sharing stories about accountability. And those stories, they're very personal. And they are building blocks for what this restorative approach means. A couple of other things I should mention too, Tom. Participation, as I said, is voluntary in our jail restorative learning dialogues. And when we begin a series of restorative dialogues, I'll always start the very first circle with, "We are not interested in why you're here. We are not interested in what got you here. If you wish to talk about that over the next 8 weeks during our circles, feel free to do so. But we are not lawyers. We have no aspirations to be lawyers. If you have anything to talk about your situation, please talk to your lawyers."
I see.
And over the 2 years that we've been doing this, very few individuals have spoken specifically about their situation, but they've given a great deal of context around what happened. And the development of trust and understanding is amazing for those who fully engage in the process. Like today, we were doing a circle on grief,
Hmm.
grief work. And when we did the prompt about things that we're grieving, lost opportunity, lost expectations, mistakes we've made, relationships, it was amazing. It's amazing what people shared. Uh, and that understanding of their own grief allows them to begin the process of becoming accountable for the grief they've caused to others. Um, I think Frankl would love it, and
I
I'll
do
get.
too.
Um, but these restorative learning dialogues, I don't teach anything,
Yeah, right.
but I
So
have learned so much.
I think I spent a number of years bivocationally where I taught high school and was a minister part time. And to me, some of the best teaching experiences are when you say, "There's no test or quiz over this material. This is just for your enrichment." That was one of them. But the really best learning experiences were when they were doing the teaching, the leading, the sharing. And so I love the way that this process does that. You made me think again about Frankl here in that to connect them. First, we read in several places where he talks about being in San Quentin and connecting with the inmates there and so forth. But in a different vein, you make me think about how, you know, he was opposed to the concept of collective guilt. And if I think I'm grossly paraphrasing here, but it was kind of like, why would you want to continue to live in a German-speaking country, knowing all that was done to Jewish people and others in German-speaking countries? But he also countered with, well, what about all those heroic people who, were from German-speaking countries and did wonderful things? His relationship with Heidegger, who at one point had an affiliation with the Nazi Party. And of course, I think that for Frankl, it was maybe in a sense restorative in his interacting and working with Heidegger because it doesn't, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to justify him, and I'm not that well versed on Heidegger, but it seems like for Frankl, Heidegger was not someone who needed to be shunned or um, rejected because of that particular association. So I'm just, of course, trying to draw in a little bit those connections, but I certainly see how they both go hand in glove.
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
oh, they are like when I was thinking about this today, I was looking at logotherapy and I just I just I just love Viktor Frankl. This is one of the
Hmm.
that book. I read it 2 or 3 times a year. I've given it to friends. I was looking at it again today. And working with Anne Graber when I was doing the course. I just love talking about it. But I was looking at some of the similarities between the restorative learning, the restorative practices, and logotherapy. And I made a couple of little notes to myself. Both are meaning centered. They're meaning
Right.
centered. Now, the dialogues that we do are meaning centered learning processes, but deep meaning. Both logotherapy and restorative practices are future oriented. Future oriented. When you're working with folks who are in jail, yeah, their past, they're living with their past every single day they're in jail. And if we want to help them uh, move beyond that, we have to start looking at their strengths and future orientation for goals and what they want to become. Both are accountability focused, like restorative work and is very much accountability focused. But unlike the
Mhm.
legal system, we're not holding you accountable.
Mhm. Mhm.
We're helping you become accountable. And
Yes, yes,
one of the thing that Frankl drives home is this sense of responsibleness.
yes.
It's so much deeper than, hey, I'm responsible. Oh, you're accountable. No, no,
Yes.
it's deeper. It's deeper. And so both of them have that in common. Both are oriented. Logotherapy and restorative practices, maybe different degrees, but both are oriented towards helping others find meaning or rediscover meaning in their lives. Both are focused on discovering and living our values.
Hmm.
Restorative practices are all values that we have as human beings. We did. I was doing a restorative circle learning dialogue a couple of weeks ago, and to get this notion of values, it's a difficult concept for all of us.
Hmm.
And values don't mean that I'm a perfect human being. These are guideposts that I use and make decisions. Do I live them all the time? Not a chance, Tom. Not a chance. I aspire to them. And when I do live in alignment with them, it's great. So to help folks identify the core values that are in there, they may not be aware of them. The question was asked, what bit of advice have you received from someone you admire in your life that has helped shape how you live your life? So it's just to think about someone who you admire gave you some wisdom. Well, the answers we got to that were absolutely. I'll give you one of them.
Hmm.
Okay, this is a group of women who are incarcerated, tough. They had very difficult life experiences growing up, and a bit of advice that she had heard from her stepmother or her mother was, "Be the parent you needed when you were a child." Wow, wow. So you take that little statement and you can parse that. Well, what does that mean for you? And from that, then you have a dialogue going on with that individual. And as we went around the circle, each of the individuals had similar pieces of advice. And then the next question was, given that advice, that's so important and meaningful to you, how do you live that today? How do you demonstrate that today while you are in jail? Because the circumstances have changed, but the value is there. And so you shift a little bit. So how do I live it today in my interactions in the jail with the guards, the COs, or with my fellow inmates who are incarcerated with me? Because you know yourself, life on a pod in a jail can be very, well, Frankl knew it.
Hmm.
He observed it. It can be very stressful.
Yes.
But living your values, that's what logotherapy is, for me, is all about.
Hmm.
The other thing, and I'll leave it with this one, both logotherapy, Viktor Frankl, to me, and in his teachings, and restorative practice, they create a healthy tension
Yes.
between what one has done and achieved and what one still has left to accomplish.
Hmm.
So when you're sitting you're sitting in circle in the jail, you're sitting with human beings who are racked with shame, they're racked with guilt, the sense of time and their future is askew. They have family, they have children outside, and that's one aspect of their past. Okay. The question then is, well, what do you want to become in the future? And that one aspect of their past is, in the legal system, it's a big failure, big mistake. But that's not all. That's not all who they are as people.
Right.
So then you can have learning dialogues about, tell me about your greatest sense of accomplishment in life. Tell me about a time when you felt really successful, and that could be when you were 5 or 4. Tell me about a time when you created something and you were really proud of it. Tell me about a time when you were lost in time and you were doing something that you enjoyed doing, and at the end of it you said, "Wow, that was great." And Viktor Frankl was a strength-based therapist. Don't deny the past. That's there. Okay. Now, that does not define who you become in the moment or in the future. So when we would finish up a restorative learning dialogue, when we were doing Frankl's work, I used to I think I have a copy here. This was near the end of our series. I grabbed 9 or 10 passages from Man's Search for Meaning, wrote them down as quotes, and then here are the 4 questions that I invited people to reflect on. Which idea or ideas caught your attention? What caused you to notice? 2, why did this idea appeal to you? How can you live it in your life today? How can you live it in the future? Number 3, where do you feel your own limitations that prevent you from living it in your life today?
Yes.
In the future. Our criminal justice system, in the future means when I go to seek employment and I have a felony conviction, it's going to be really difficult. Really difficult. Even though I've served my time, it's really difficult. And a restorative approach to that would be to the community. What can we do in the future as a community to enable this person to live this value? That's a big ask of the community.
Sure
it's
is.
not individual. And
Yes.
finally, the last question I put on, and I took a number. We did a series of these on Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. We brought the book in and we left it with some of the folks to read. What can you appreciate? What can you appreciate about Frankl's ideas? And how can you use his ideas to live in right relationship with yourself, others, and the community? And we're not talking about the perfect relationship. We're talking about a balanced relationship with yourself, others, the community, and the world. And Tom, some of the guys and gals who were given these ideas from Man's Search for Meaning, they're not very literate, and some of them aren't great writers. But I'll tell you what, when you ask the question and give them time to reflect and think about an idea and how they can live it, they got it.
Mm-hmm.
They get it.
Yes.
And again, that's why, so the logotherapeutic approach, that's one of the, it's just aligned so well with restorative practices. And and the fact that the first 90 pages of Man's Search for Meaning are Viktor Frankl's experiences and observations in a concentration camp, which arose by any other name as a prison,
right.
a jail, brings this restorative practice in perfect synchronicity, I guess is the word, or alignment with the Viktor Frankl's ideas. And I'll give you a couple of quick examples just from our jail. And if I'm going on too long, please stop me. Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning, he talks about the three paths to meaning: by creating a work or doing a deed, by experiencing something, goodness, truth, beauty, experiencing nature, experiencing culture, or by experiencing another human being in his or her uniqueness. And then, of course, by the attitude we take towards unavoidable suffering.
Right.
So that second pathway to meaning, we were in a circle one day in a dialogue, and I think I brought that quote in. And we were talking about experiencing nature. Frankl, when he talks about being in the concentration camp and he looks at the trees, and he sees a flower blooming, but that experience generated memories of his wife and memories of life in Vienna, experiencing nature. So I threw it out to the guys in the dialogue, and they're in our county jail. They're in the blocks. There's not much. There's some light comes in, and there's not a lot of opportunities to see nature. But one of the guys, when the question went around, he thought about it and he said, just the other day, I was looking out my window, cell block window and he saw a fox.
Mhm.
The fox went by, and he had seen the fox before, and then he told a little bit. So what was that like for you? What did it remind you of? What emotions did it stimulate? And he reminded him growing up where he grew up and being out in nature and seeing animals, how much he missed it. Uh, but that whole thing, and then I said, "You got it." In that experience there, that moment, he rediscovered a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, maybe an underlying value, his love of nature, his memory of boyhood. I don't know. So many things opened up. And when he
Mhm.
just, that's a much better, to me as an educator, as a facilitator, that's a much better understanding of logotherapy than a 500-word essay.
Absolutely. Yes.
And we had other little stories. Like one of the guys told me the other day that when the weather started turning mild, and he was looking out, and here's how he said there was a lot of snow on the ledge outside my cell, and I knew it was getting warm because every hour I'd go back and I'd see the mound of snow was diminishing in size, and he was watching it melt, and that was a concept of time and nature and a different experience of maybe life's transitoriness. We didn't get that deep into it,
Sure.
but again, it's a way of finding meaning in very difficult circumstances.
Very nice. Nice. As I think I either said or implied at the beginning, I think I just need to wind you up and let you go because when you talk about everything, it's just I'm not bored yet. So uh, the joy that you experience, and it's also very hopeful, and I
Yep.
think that what you have there is something that I hope will catch on and expand throughout our country and not just in the justice system, but in other areas as well. So I do want to sort of conclude by asking you, um, my goal with these interviews, with my website and my work, including my diplomate project, and let me say, my diplomate project has been approved. I have paid my fees. I've sent everything in, and I'm now just waiting for that certificate to come in the mail. So I can actually now call myself diplomate in logo philosophy because I'm not a clinician. So I'm very happy about that. But can you?
Congratulations, Tom.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I
Well
did an
done.
awful lot of work on that, but
Yep.
obviously, as everyone does, but also my website, my interviews, and my full-time job. So, maybe I would have done it in a quicker manner, but I feel very good about the work I did. What I'd like to ask you to do in conclusion, if this is not too much trouble, is try to imagine uh, uh, applying what you do, restorative learning dialogues, restorative justice, in a different context. And it doesn't have to be my context. It could be in adult education, or I think you called it adult education, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, you're in New Hampshire and I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. So and you're from Canada originally, but I will
Yep.
say I've been to New Hampshire and I don't think it's that different, quite honestly. In many ways. So, can you, whether ministry, and I don't mean to pull you out of a comfort zone, but can you imagine how people who are not engaged in the justice system could make use of restorative learning processes, even if it's on a smaller scale?
Can I imagine it?
Yes. And
Oh,
maybe sort of talk us through it just a little bit, if you can, if that's not asking too much.
well, Tom, I imagine it. I think I told you when you and I first spoke, this is not work for me. Restorative is a way of being in the world in relationships with others. It's just not work.
Yes.
It's a way of being, and I can see this. I imagine, like I'm going out on. 2 days from now, I'm going out to one of our nursing homes and going to talk about being restorative in the workplace. And we're going to sit in circle. I've got to come up with a couple of prompting questions, but we're going to sit in circle and I'm going to invite people to share some values and a story around work. And I want people to experience how vulnerable that process is. I
Hmm.
want people to sit in circle, not as your job title, as your role as an employee, as a manager. I want you to sit in circle and answer this question as honestly and as openly as you can and will, or reflect on it and pass. I want people to experience what it means to take the risk to be vulnerable. And I want people to experience what it means to offer the gift of presence and listening. We're not going to solve any problems. We're not going to get a raise in pay. We're not going to improve morale and productivity. We're going to sit in a dialogue space to share and to listen. And at the end of this process, I'm going to ask people, how was that experience for you? Ooh, I don't like that. It's too touchy-feely. That's what I knew was going to happen. I wouldn't have come to this. I need data. I need facts. Okay, that's okay. However, we come to work like we go to jail. We come into it as human beings. We put time in as human beings, and we leave as human beings. That is what I imagine, how I imagine being restorative. It's not doing restorative, it's just being restorative. Learning to listen. To listen is a gift, it's a skill we need to practice. As I've said to you before, I think I'm a co-learner in the restorative learning dialogues.
Hmm.
I listened this afternoon for 40 minutes to some amazing stories. I shared a couple of my own, and when
Hmm.
I share, I'm not sharing it because for any other reason, but I want to experience the risk of sharing a story with people I've gotten to know, because it is risky
Yes.
and it is a vulnerable space to be, but it is so rewarding in terms of strengthening those connections. So that's how I see it. Tom, uh, the best evaluation that I've heard about the restorative learning dialogues from the folks who participated them in our jail is at the end of a 7 or 8 week or 10 week session. Two things I've heard, but the best one is, Patrick, when I'm here for an hour, I don't feel like I'm in jail.
Hmm. Nice.
That is unbelievable for me.
Yes.
That's the liberating, restorative, uh, meaningful response. The second one, which is equally as gratifying but not as deep, is that when we finished an 8 week series of learning dialogues, we've had a number of the men and women come up to us afterwards and say, "What's next? We don't want this to stop."
Nice.
And that was how I brought in a series of 3 or 4 weeks on man's search for meaning. People were asking for more. They were
Hmm.
motivated. It's a spiritual, and I mean spiritual the way Frankl talks about it.
Sure.
The indomitable human spirit within here.
Yes.
It's it's
Mhm.
it's that attitudinal value, right?
Yes. Well, if you don't mind, I'll speak to that from a religious point of view just for a second. And I'm not, the criticism that I try to avoid is somebody thinking that I want to use logotherapy as a gimmick for Christianity or baptize it, make it. So no, uh, in fact, one thing that I try to say very often in these interviews and with other people is part of the problem with the church or with religion in general is that we have totally missed out on the human element of relationships with each other. We were, in the 70s and 80s and 90s, it seemed like it was all about get saved or, believe in this or don't believe in that and do this or don't do that. And people don't believe in God, a God that's all about that. And how do you make God believable if it's not about relationship? And the Gospels are about a relationship being restored, quite honestly, from a different point of view. But so I always say, if we don't do the human part right, we may as well forget about the religious aspect of it. So I I agree with that 100%. I can also see how restorative dialogues can be useful in family counseling or in a parent-child relationship, you know, or um, so many other examples. So I had to throw that in there because, for me. I've got, well, I have a background here, but I have 1,000 million theology books, but I have thinned that out a lot. And in my later life and later career, I've decided that if I don't get the human part right, none of that matters. And so I really think what you have with restorative dialogue and restorative justice is is a wonderful thing. And I think that I need to be able to help my colleagues in the ministry see the value of that. Not that they don't or wouldn't, but I really admire everything you've said, and it's not about uh, a gimmick. It's not a way of trying to get people,
Nope.
hooked into this and then bait and switch to something else. We have to get the human dimension, even the human spiritual dimension right.
100%. And Tom, our organized religion, our organized institutionalized religious systems around the world, I can't speak around the world,
Mhm.
but they have become institutionalized, much like our criminal legal system has.
Right, exactly. Yes.
And as a result, we're missing out on the basic tenet, love your neighbor as yourself.
Hmm.
And when I go into the jails or whatever, I love working. I love working. It doesn't matter. The classroom doesn't matter to me. But I look at it, and when I come out, there's the gospel passage. And Tom, I'll tell you right now, I was baptized Roman Catholic. Okay. But over the last 30 years, I've become what I like to tell people, I'm a Roman Catholic. Roamin apostrophe
Got you.
small c Catholic, which is a
Sure.
universal. I roam and wander wherever I can and
Hmm.
listen to people who believe in uh, love, forgiveness, and the human connection between all of us. That's
Yes.
all I look for. I don't care what you call it, but tell me what you believe in the value of loving one another
Hmm.
and forgiving oneself and others for when we commit harm and when we do harm, and um, how we nurture and foster that human connection. Because we're living in a world today, Tom. We were doing our grief circle and conversation today, dialogue. I said to the guys, the last couple of weeks, and I've looked at the word grief. I'm living in a heavy world. We're living. It feels very heavy to me, and
Yes.
I'm an optimist through and through. And I've got grandchildren. I've got 5 kids. The heaviness gets lifted. The grief lifts in circle with other human beings and
Hmm.
listening. And I said to them today, I'm in here today. One of the gentlemen doesn't know if he's going to be sentenced to state prison for 10 years or 20 years. Another guy's waiting the whole notion of time. But we sat together for an hour, and I thank them for lifting the heaviness of the world. And that's nothing more than human connection, Tom. You know
Yes.
this.
Amen. Very nice.
So, so thank you. I, if there's any way I can help you, you want to talk again, please. I'd love to share some ideas. If you need any help with this,
Sure.
working with your fellow ministers and sitting in circle, let's do it. I'll
That's
come your way.
wonderful. Well, I'll tell you what, let's conclude this meeting here, and
Yep.
then I have a question or two to ask you. So again, I very much appreciate it, and I'm going to sign off now from this interview.